All right, today we are working on graphing radicals. All right, and so I'm going to do a couple of these problems with you, and then you'll be on your own. So I'll do 3, and then it'll leave you with 5 to do on your own. So first thing I want you to do is write at the top of your paper, a square root x minus h. That's all under the radical, and then plus k. Okay, so first thing, we're talking about starting points. Starting point is opposite of h and k. If there's nothing to the right of x underneath the radical, has to be under the radical because h is under the radical. If there's nothing under the radical to the right of x, that means the value for nothing is 0. So h would be 0, k would be -1. So starting point be 0 because there's no h under there, -1. There's a little bit, there's something that's going to be a little bit different when we get to one of the ones that I'm going to do for you on the back, and that'll be the only difference. So our starting point is at 0 on x and -1 on y. So there's our starting point. One thing to note, on a square root function, the starting point is only going to have an arrow going out of one side of it, and then the starting point will be the end of it. And so it should look something like this, a starting point with an arrow going out of it. Notice nothing coming out of this side of the point. So it's just going to one side on a square root. That is different on a cubed root. And there would be a starting point with an arrow going out of both sides. Okay, next step is calculator stuff. So we'll go to camera here, turn it on obviously, go to your table, down to edit function, clear everything out. So we're going to put second, and then we're looking for that right there, a square root. It's in blue, that's why we hit second. So right there, and we want to put it exactly how it looks in the calculator. So a negative x. Notice on your paper, nothing else is under the radical, so you have to hit to the right. You notice we're outside of the radical now. We're not underneath. -1. Make sure it matches up because you don't want to mess up your graph just by user error. Okay, so enter in, start at 0. Step should be at 1, and then calculate. Notice down here, you could scroll down forever, it's going to be errors because there's nothing coming out of one side of the point. And so notice here, 0, 1, the same thing as our starting point, happens directly after the error. That's how you can know on a regular square root function that that's your starting point. Then you just scroll up and look for other points. So we'd have other good points. So -1, 0, that's a decimal, don't want that. And then -9, 2, and we're going to stop at -10. Let me show you why. We're going to stop there because this only goes out to -10 on x, and it only goes to +10 on x. So we're not going out any further than -10 or +10 when we scroll up and down. Okay, so you should still have your table up. You're going to write down those good points now. There's an x and then f of x, which is the same thing as y. So we started at 0, and then we had a -1, and then we had a -1, 0. All this you should see in your calculator, -4, 1. Practice the steps with me, -9, 2. So now we graph all those points, and we'll be done. So we already got 0, -1. Now we got -1, 0. So -1 and then 0 on y. So there's right here. Then -4 on x, 1 on y. So -4 on x up to 1 on y right there. Then we have -9 on x and then 2 on y. So we're right there. Then you go to your starting point because this is a regular square root function, and you go out to connect the dots. So notice it looks just like the example, but it's just going to the left. I mean, it could go that way. I mean, it could loop down and go that way. It can go up and over that way, or it can go down that way. It doesn't matter, but main thing is you'll have a starting point and it'll go out into a direction. Okay, let's do number 4. We're going to do number 4. Okay, so that is a cubed root. So this time we do have something underneath the radical next to x to the right. So that's a -1. Remember we said opposite of h. So opposite of h is -1. So our opposite of h right there is a +1 rather. So 1 and then k is -3. So that's our start. Difference with these is you'll have a starting point, but you'll have something coming out to one side. It'll look like that. So you have an arrow going both directions from your starting point. Okay. So let's put our starting point at 1 on x and then go up to -3. So it's right there is our starting point. I'm sorry. That's a +3. So 1 and then down to -3. It's right here. Okay, so next step, what is it? You should know. Go to your table, go down to edit function, clear it out. And so you always start by putting your cubed root. So I've showed you this before. Cube, or 3, that's a big 3 right now, but you're going to put it right there. It's going to go in that box in front of the square root symbol. So you'll hit second right there, and notice the 3 got smaller. So also on number 4, there's a negative out front. So you have to put your negative out front, but do that after you get the cubed root in there. So notice the negative cube root, then you put what's underneath. You got x, and then you got -1. Then you're going outside of the radical to put your -3. Look at it, make sure it matches up. It does. You hit enter, start at 0, go down and calculate. And so now we're starting at 0, so we're going to go down to a +10, and then we'll go back up to -10 because this one doesn't have any errors because it's a cubic root. So we have 0, -2, 1, -3, 2, -4, 9, -5, and we're at 10, and it's a decimal, so we'll go back up. We started here, so we'll go back up and see these good points if there's any. Yeah, we have -7, 1, and that's it. So let's go back to our document. We'll make our chart. X, and then f of x. And so we'll go back and we'll start with the starting point. It doesn't matter the order that you write the numbers in, as long as they're right. So we had 1, -3. We had 0, -2, 2, -4. We have 9, -5. We'll go back up and we'll start going the other direction. We have -7, -1, and that's it. So now we start graphing. So we already graphed the we already graphed 1, -3. So now we got to do 0 on x, and then -2 on y. So right there. Then we have 2, -4. So 2 on x, and then -4. Something seems off with that. Let me look at this again. So starting point was, well, that's what's wrong. Wait, so no, that's not our starting point. So 0, -2, that's right. and we have 1, -3. That's right. And then 2, -4. That seems wrong. Let me go back and look at my table. 2, -4. Oh, that's what it is, guys. Probably screaming at me through the screen here. That's a -1 right there. So our starting point was wrong from the jump. +1 is out. Here, ladies and gentlemen, so 1, -3 is there. So our starting point is 1, -3. Like so. We had it on the negative side. And I noticed the difference because I had points that looked like that. That didn't, like this right here, that didn't look right. So I caught that error. As you have more practice, you would be able to catch that as well. Anyways, continuing along. So then we have 0 and -2. So 0, -2. Then you have 2, -4. That looks more like it. 2, -4. Notice 3 points right there that look like they can make a line, and they're going in a straight direction. Then you have 9, -5. So 9 out here on X, -5 on Y, which would be right there. So right here. And then we have -7, -1. So -7 is this way, and then -1, which is right there. So -7, -1. All right, and then you have an arrow coming out that way, come through, connect the dots, going that way, just like that. So notice it takes on the original shape that we said it should look like. Now, it can be different, like maybe this side would be going up and this side would be going down. It just depends on the transformations. But graph your points, connect the dots. All right, and then let's do one more. Let's go to, let's say, number 6. All right, so number 6, also a cubic function, so we know we should have arrows going to both sides. So starting point, this is the one difference. If you have a negative in front of the X, you have to distribute that negative in. And so that would look like that. Okay, when you have a negative in front of the parentheses like that, you have to distribute in. So let's do it out here. X plus 2. Distribute that in. That becomes a -X. But then when you distribute that in, it becomes a -2. So when you're doing your starting point, okay, it really looks like that. So the opposite of a -2 is a +2. So you can't just look at that and say, oh, it's a 2. So opposite of that is -2, because you have to distribute in, because that's parentheses around that. You have to distribute in your negative, which makes it a -2. So the opposite really is a +2. So starting point is +2, 1. If you don't understand that, you'll still be able to get your points from the calculator and graph it, but it would benefit you to know how to do starting points when you have a negative to start with. Okay, so you could just know if there's a negative there that it's not going to be the opposite of H. It'll just stay that number. Anyhow, so that's the start. And so we have 2, 1, point right there. And then what do? Go to the calculator. So here we are again, going into table, edit function. This is the last one I'm showing, guys. We have, remember, start off with the cubic root. So 3, second, right here. 3 got smaller. Then there is a 2, is that, out front. So you hit your 2. Then you go back, right here. Now we have negative X plus 2, all underneath the radical. Hit to the right until you get outside. then +1, then enter. Let's start at 0 and go down. So we have a 1 and a 3, 2, 1, 3, -1, going down. Remember, we're only going down to 10, so then you have 10, -3, so we'll go back up and get points on the other side, going up to -10, so any good points there? We have a -6, 5, and that's all for that direction. And so let's write it down. Got our t-chart. This is a cubic function again, so you should have arrows going out of both sides of the starting point. So let's see if we can graph this one right this time. All right, so we started with 2, 1. Then we also had a 1, 3. Again, it does not matter the order. You had a 3, -1. We have, what else do we got? And then we had a 10, -3. Now let's go up to the negative side of x. Did we have anything? Yes, we did. We had a -6 and 5. And that's all. So now we graph. Already graphed 2, 1. Let's do 1 on x, and then a 3, which would be right there. So 1, 3. Then we have a 3, -1. So 3, -1. 3, -1. Then we have a 10, -3. 10 down to -3, which will be right there. And then the last one is -6, 5. So -6 up to 5, which would be right there. So -6, 5. So again, notice 3 points together there going out and 3 points going over here. So starting point that way, starting point to that way. So let's just connect the dots. And that's really it, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you understand that. Get with me and ask me questions if you do not. All right. Have a good one.